Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call our meeting to order. First, I want to apologize for the delay. Our consultant she just apologized to us. She got stuck in awful traffic coming down from Boston, so I apologize for the late start, but we'll get going. So having called the meeting to order, today is May 12th, 2022. This is a special meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Mr. Waterman, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Blasbald.
Here.
Ms. Hildebrand.
Here.
Ms. Hoskins. Ms. Lima.
Here.
Mr. Mather.
Here.
Ms. Schott. Brooke Thompson. Gabriel Anthony.
Thank you. We have 4, which is a quorum. So we'll take citizens' comments. Ms. Morgan, are you signing up? Seems to be. So I know both names, so I will call Mr. McKay. If you could just make sure that mic is on. We had a problem with that last meeting. Yep, hold on one second. Thank you.
Testing.
Now we're good. And as always, if you could please state your name and address for the record, and we ask that you please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
My name is Kerry McKay. I'm on the town council that some of you may already know. I also own a furniture business in this.
Could you, name and address?
Oh,
sorry.
747 Shermantown Road, Saunderstown, Rhode Island.
Thank you. Sorry to cut
4012, no.
It's okay. Thank you.
Tonight I'm here, and I've made these comments publicly on the town council in the past, okay? Back in 2000, I believe it was 15, when we hired our new town manager, all right? We established a citizens advisory committee. The committee, I was on the town council. I was part of the majority party. We agreed that it would be a bipartisan committee to review who was going to be our new town manager. As you know, and I've stated publicly, that I voted against Mr. Mollis for political reasons on a couple of separate occasions. I've since apologized to Mr. Mollis several times because I didn't do the right thing, okay? I did things for politics, and I never should have done that because he was always one of the better candidates. In having worked with Mr. Mollis all these years, the recommendations that came from that committee, I disregarded most of their comments from both my side and the Democratic side. But it was definitely a bipartisan effort to have our candidates reviewed by what I think ought to be members of our public, parents, grandparents even, administrators, business people, Democrats, Republicans. You pick, you choose. But as we all know, the political headwinds of this nation are blowing all over the place. Right now, the pendulum is here, okay? And it may be in favor of a very liberal policy, but next year it could blow back this way. We don't know. But the actions that this committee will take over the next several weeks/months to hire a candidate will weigh heavily on either the next group of people that come in and take your seats, if that happens over the next few years. What I'm asking is a bipartisan effort to really get a candidate that everybody can be happy with, that a candidate that can lead our children into the future, that a candidate that looks at both sides of the political spectrum, because our children shouldn't be exposed to what we've been exposed all of ourselves to. They shouldn't be any part of this. They should be learning. And we should set up a very conducive environment to just learning. School departments, school committees, towns have taken a very different political path. I think politics needs to go away. I think we need to bury the hatchet on this score, and I think we should set up a bipartisan committee, not chaired by any one of you, chaired by a separate bipartisan effort. You pick and choose, and I understand there will be administrators, but administrators administrate. School people do what school people do, okay? But business people should have a seat at the table. everybody should have a seat at this table. Parents in particular should have a seat at this table, okay? That's what I'm kind of hoping, and maybe you'll heed their advice. And that's all I can make a request. I made a request at our budget meetings
I have
during
to
the
ask
town
you to
council.
wrap up, sir. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you very much. Mr. McGuinn?
Jim McGuinn, 412 Chimney Rock Drive, North Kingston. I agree with Mr. McKay. It should be a committee that represents all facets of the town. Unlike the DEI committee that was established, which our former superintendent said they only wanted like-minded people on. So people with the other point of view were not part of it and don't participate. So you're not bringing the community together. This community is split. We have 4 people who have been identified as potentially abusing children. Over 27 years this has gone on. It was reported. Reports were lost by the administration. We have the U.S. Attorney General, Department of Civil Rights, involved, not only the Attorney General. This is very serious. We have to bring the community together. I looked at the New England School Development Council that I think are doing the presentation today. It's basically made up of former superintendents from around New England. Now, my concern is that we have a Rhode Island Superintendents Association that our former superintendent is an officer of to this day. There were 2 investigative reports that identified there were major missteps by our former superintendent. We have had a major problem with coach who's been terminated at North Kingston, goes to another school district, has a problem there, and then goes to another school district. The naked fat testing coach left, no one reported it, and he ended up at an elementary school. It's called pass the trash. What we don't want is this organization, I don't take anything away from you, but we want to make sure that you are not involved in that type of deal, that you are not representing either Philip Auger or our former Assistant Superintendent, Mancieri, and that you have in the past or currently are not replacing or putting in place superintendents who had to leave other districts because of significant problems. And I think you need to address that. This is a unique situation. It's not like most of the searches you do. And I think those are concerns of the community. And I think, Mr. McKay, it needs to be a separate. There is a petition right now that's got well over 100 signatures on it of people who feel this school committee was part of the problem, and the school committee should not be selecting the new superintendent. An independent committee should
I have to ask you to please wrap up.
And make their recommendation to the school committee for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. So having completed citizens' comments, we'll have a discussion of a presentation from NKSD, who is the organization that we awarded our bid to conduct a superintendent search. And just as a reminder for members of the community, they're looking for names and submitting names and finding candidates. They're not making any decisions with respect to the selection of the superintendent. They're simply a searching organization. And they have laid out a presentation for us. So I will hand the microphone over.
Thank you, Mr. Glasgow.
Thank you.
I'm really pleased to be here, really pleased to spending so long in the car. Let me introduce myself. My name is Sally Dias. I work for NKSD, obviously, doing projects, but mainly doing superintendent searches.
One other guy, can you either go pull up the gain on it or see if we can move it closer?
No, it's okay. We'll fix it.
Is that better? Can people hear me?
Victor, can we pull up the gain in the back? Thank you.
Give us a moment. Sorry, thank you.
Is it okay now? Oh, okay. Thank you. You'd be sorry if I did that.
Do you mind trying it again?
Can you hear me now? I feel like the Verizon salesman. Can you hear me now? It's okay.
Let's try again.
How about this?
That's louder. Mr. McKay, thank you.
Is that okay? Okay, great. I was beginning to introduce myself, Sally Dias, working currently for NKSD, doing special projects with school districts and also superintendent searches. My background is I was a former teacher of physics and mathematics and also worked for the State Department of Education. Was a superintendent of schools for 22 years in 2 different districts, 8 in Linfield and 14 in Watertown, both in Massachusetts. I also, after that, was a vice president at Emmanuel College for 10 years, where I worked with teacher training and administrative training programs. So I'm delighted to be here and to work with you on your very important search for a new superintendent. You don't need me to do that again, though, do you? Is this better? Okay, great. I think I can manage this with one hand. There was a packet that you all received, and I'd like to go through that. And we may just stop so I can get your input on these different areas. I think it's extremely important that we settle as much as we can this evening so we can move into the process. The timeline is tight, and I know you want to make sure that you have a superintendent early next school year. And schools close in June, and we're going to need the community to be involved in this process. I certainly agree with the former speakers that it's important to have people in the community involved. So this overview is really the items that are on this agenda. But the overall purpose is to find the strongest, best fit for North Kingstown that will really work to engage in the community and solve the problems that you see now. So that's our purpose. This is your search, the community search. It isn't NKSD's search. So we make adjustments as we go along to make sure that it fits perfectly with what you're trying to accomplish. First of all, we need a liaison. You can see that from the agenda. The liaison is someone in the district who will work very closely with me to ensure that the process goes smoothly and openly. I don't know if you want to address that now or we should go back to it.
My proposal for the liaison, and just so that folks watching at home, the liaison, and clarify, the liaison is the person you would be in contact with when you need to set up a group, when you need communications. They're NKSD's point person for this process, correct?
Person that works in the district, exactly, yep.
So my recommendation for that is going to be Brian Lally, who's seated behind you. He's the Human Resources Director.
Great. Be pleased to work with him. It's Brian Lally?
Correct.
Great. He will be hearing from me a lot.
I'll give you all of his contact information, just not on camera.
Okay. We're to call him at 2 a.m.
Exactly.
We also need an official spokesperson for the superintendent search. That's basically the one person who's going to talk to the press or to others about the search process. You don't want a whole bunch of people reporting on what's going on. You want one person. So that could obviously be the interim superintendent or a member of the school committee, but it has to be one person that will really speak for the process.
I don't have a recommendation for that, so I'm happy to be that person if the committee wishes.
I mean, I think it makes sense for it to not be a school committee member. I mean, I do, because that's just not really, we're not the day-to-day operators of the school department, so I think it should be a single point person that you think is appropriate within the district. So I'd leave that decision, I think, to you to decide who you think that best person would be.
And once again, in full transparency and clarity, so that there can be no miscommunication, I am declaring myself as not being a candidate for this process, so I am more than happy to be the spokesperson.
I think
Great.
Thank that would work fine.
Thank you. The timeline. You have a timeline in your packet. You can see that it's very tight. We're going to be going over the announcement letter tonight, and hopefully we can come to some conclusions about what it will be so that NSDEC can begin to begin its search process widely. And that's an important piece. We don't have a long time to advertise, but we need to get started. So hopefully we'll be able to solve that.
Now, I do have some comments on that. One of the things, and Sally, you and I haven't discussed this, but I know in the proposal there was an option to add a community survey.
And I recommend that.
Yes. So one of the things I'm wondering, because I know in that letter that that I've seen a rough draft of, I know one of the items, and I think the one that you're speaking to says, what are we looking for in a candidate? And I'm wondering if we should move that community survey up to get the feedback, to help have that feedback go into the letter telling us what we're looking for in a superintendent. So your thoughts on that?
That makes sense. However, we need to advertise right away. And doing that survey is going to take a week or two to get the kind of input that we want. So I would recommend that and I can give you some examples of what lots of communities are looking for. Someone who walks on water. But it is general in a way. Much more specific will be the outline, the candidate profile that I will put together based on the focus groups and the survey. And that will be used by the screening committee in interviewing and deciding on candidates to send to the school committee. So I think we'll capture all that information, maybe in a different way, but it'll allow us to move right ahead with the announcement.
So for clarity, you're saying the community survey would come into effect when the screening committee is actually looking at candidates. You're going to use the information from that survey and apply that to the candidates who have applied. Okay.
Exactly, and the focus groups.
And I was just looking through it. Can you refresh my memory? How many focus groups are included in the process?
6. However, you can do as many as you want. I've had one community that did 17. I'm not sure that was a good idea.
17?
So.
And one of my recommendations was, I believe in the timeline, the focus groups are happening over the summer.
No, the focus groups need to happen before school's out. Because
Thank you. That's what I wanted to.
That's what the point was going to be.
Yes,
yeah.
that you made my point, so I'll stop there.
You want teachers and parents
Yes.
and everybody involved. So, great. Okay, we're on the same page.
Can I just jump in for 1 second? I understand what you're saying about a timeline and wanting to get it out there quickly, but I think I would prefer to go slower and do it more thoroughly. And I think what you said, Mike, about having some preliminary information at least when we're putting the wish list or whatever together would be helpful, even if it means I don't want to rush this and end up with.
Well, what I'm hearing is just that the letter that Mr. Waterman was referring to is not as specific as I think he was originally thinking it was, so that community involvement is not necessarily going to influence that letter. The letter, I assume, is basically you're seeking qualified candidates. I mean, it's...
Exactly.
Is it in the
Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely, we want to have. Right. Yes.
So I have an example here that I could read to you of something that you might consider. It's totally up to you. But the next superintendent of the North Kingston Public Schools must have student achievement and well-being as a primary focus, the ability to build trust and successfully collaborate with all stakeholders is essential. Qualified candidates must have strong communication and interpersonal skills as evidenced by effective communication and collaboration with a variety of constituent groups. Having watched some of your school committee meetings and talked to Mike and talked to the interim assistant, I think I have a sense of this, but you can tell me if I'm wrong, because this is your search, not mine. Qualified candidates must have successful school and central office administrative experience combined with a background in teaching. I don't know if that's a priority for you, but you can tell me that. The ideal candidate will have experience in strategic planning and a strong understanding of school finance and budget. See, a lot of these things are just general things that everybody wants to make sure they have in a superintendent. When we do focus groups in the survey, you're going to get much more specific information.
Does that statement include experience dealing with unions?
We could,
Okay,
absolutely.
I'd like it to, please.
Let me add that. An advanced graduate degree is preferred and a master's degree is required. A Rhode Island superintendent license or eligibility for license is necessary. The North Kingston School Committee will offer a competitive contract with regionally competitive salary, commensurate with qualifications and experience, along with a generous benefits package. Those are the general kinds of things. I mean, I changed it somewhat because I think I have a little understanding of what you might be looking for. But you want added to this experience with
I think it's important that since we are a union shop, for lack of a better term, that whoever comes in has experience with that.
I agree. So tell me whether...
No, that sounds excellent. And, you know, like we're saying, that letter is pretty broad and pretty standard. So while the community involvement is a huge part, and if you look through this, we to the point of some of the speakers earlier, we have a lot of community involvement baked into this, and a lot of the points that were made today are actually in the packet as well, and I think you're going to get to a little bit later. So I think that allays our concern, because the community involvement part is going to be an essential part of this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there other comments on the timeline? People who were on the screening committee, which we'll talk about in the...
I would like to talk about that a bit, because that is a concern of a lot of people in town. So you have some recommendations, and I'd love to hear what you have to say there.
Sure. But people are going to have to be available in the summer. The focus groups and the survey can happen before school ends, but the screening committee will need to work in the summer. Any other questions about that?
The community survey, is that survey designed, so in education we use school community a lot, and that's when we're talking about our kids and our parents. The community survey, is it a school community or is it a town of North Kingstown community?
Both.
Okay.
So it's a proprietary survey. So it's been the same for almost all for the districts that we all work with. However, it really deals with all of the kinds of skills and abilities and experiences that superintendents probably should have, and people who are developing their priorities. So what will happen is there'll be a place where people can designate that they're teachers, that they're other staff, they're administrators, they're parents, community members, town officials, students, if you want. We usually do focus groups with students. I'll tell you, it's my favorite thing. It's amazing how insightful they are. So we can talk about who you want in different focus groups, but
So I have a follow-up question, and I may elicit some help.
sure.
I can reach out to all of the school community. I have email addresses. I would imagine I would reach out to the town manager to help get this to the broader community as well. What has your experience been with engaging community members outside of the school department for a survey like this? How have others done it?
I would recommend that you put it on your website, that people in town are welcome to take this survey with directions for how they can do it. We'd need to work with a technology person. And in order to get the word out, you could use your local newspaper to announce that this is available. And you'll get some community representation. The largest representation is usually from parents, and also from teachers and administrators. But you want to make it available for everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. We can adjust the timeline as we go along, but this is a hopefully a good possibility.
How would you classify this timeline? Is this aggressive? Is this par for the course? Is this slow? I wonder if you can...
It's not super aggressive, but it's not slow. I think it's somewhere in the middle. It gives sufficient time to do everything we need to do. And although people sometimes worry about doing something like this over the summer, you just never know. All I can say is if the person that's going to lead this district, a very important appointment, isn't satisfactory to the community, the school committee, we'll do it again. By the way, NSDEC does it for free the second time. Hopefully we don't have to do that, but it can happen because the worst mistake you can make is hiring the wrong person.
So I just want to make sure I understood what you said correctly. So let's say 10 candidates are brought forward to us finally, and we're like, we don't like any of them. Mm-hmm. We start over again?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I don't think the screening committee would bring 10 candidates forward. Yeah, usually the number is about 3. Yeah. And if you're not satisfied, you should not appoint them. I'll be very disappointed, but my feelings are not primary.
Now, before we move on too far in the timeline, did we finish the letter? Because I know we talked about the successful candidate, ... And you started talking about that. Did we talk about the qualifications, the minimum qualifications at the school committee? Okay.
What I heard you say was that the minimum qualifications would be a master's degree, a teaching experience, and a Rhode Island superintendent certification or the ability to obtain one. That's what I remember you saying.
Exactly.
I missed that. I had the wrong packet, so I was looking for this letter, so I must have been looking when you said that. My apologies.
Okay.
And we can certainly, we will weigh, there may be candidates that exceed those qualifications, but that would be the minimum threshold that we'd be willing to consider.
Sure. Okay. You seem to think that what I read was appropriate for what you're looking for, adding what Ms. Lima suggested about union experience, working directly with unions. And I'll just make that correction, and I'll send it back. And if it's okay, we'll put that right into the letter because we want to get that out as soon as possible. But if you look again at the timeline, I think we're okay with the timeline, and understanding that it can change if needed. But the needs assessment process, the focus groups. They're usually groups of constituents, focus groups for parents, and we'll do this virtually.
All of the focus groups are virtual?
Yes.
Okay.
They are. And they work pretty well. I was kind of surprised. I was a little concerned about it. But in the ones that I've done virtually, I thought the process worked pretty well. And they limit the number that can go in. So if you have more people, you just add another focus group. But you want parents, obviously, You want teachers, you want administrators, principals, central office people, town officials. The other piece of it, community members, sometimes they add to the parent focus groups, but that's up to you. We can also do interviews. If there are people that you want me to individually talk to on phone, I'm happy to do it. I'd be happy to do it with the school committee, if each of you would like to talk to me individually. Doing a focus group of the school committee can be done, but it would have to be an open meeting. So sometimes people think it's best to have individual interviews.
A parent focus group, I don't know what your cap is, but we go over the cap, we can schedule additional parent focus groups.
We can.
Okay.
Do you do them by level? Sorry.
You mean like elementary, middle, high school? Yeah.
Exactly.
We can. We can do the same with teachers.
I do.
But sometimes that gets to be a lot of focus groups. But that's fine. This is very important, especially in this community. So we will do that. I will work with the liaison on advertising them. Mm-hmm. What I do recommend strongly is that people choose their own people. So the Teachers Association would choose teachers. Parents Association would choose parents. Well, this is to be on the screening committee. I'm jumping ahead. Any parent or teacher can be in a focus group.
Okay.
So.
Do you know offhand, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
What?
Do you know the capacity?
20.
20.
Okay.
Do you have people pre-register? So
Yes.
okay.
Well, some pre-register.
I'm sorry, just to confirm, for the focus group, right?
Yeah.
Focus group is 20.
And is there any option to have that done in person at all?
Not really.
Okay.
The proposal said everything would be virtual.
Yeah.
But you as a school committee wanted me to be here individually, and I'm happy to do that. But to come down and do 10 or 12 focus groups would be really
that's
difficult.
a lot.
Well, it also provides, the reality is that there's very little barrier to attending an online focus
Oh,
group.
absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
you don't have to get in your car, you don't
Right.
have to be free, you don't need a babysitter, you don't need anything. You know, if your kid's yelling, you hit mute in the living room. I mean, we've all done that.
Yep.
And I think that really does provide, overall, the absolute maximum ability for public participation. So.
With the understanding that 6 are included, and it sounds like we've gone over 6, does Mr. Lally have the ability to add additional focus groups, or do I need to bring it back to this board?
Well, the answer to that question would be the standard minimum purchasing threshold
Okay.
that you have,
Okay.
which is the $5,000 number. So the overall award exceeded that. We've selected a vendor, and so as long as you are not exceeding expenses above that in this process, and I think Attorney Carroll would agree,
Yes.
that you're within your purchasing just standard normal purchasing procedures. If you're ever at a point where you've gone over that, you have to come to us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think we've talked about the interviews. You can let me know if there are any town officials or people you think should be individually interviewed, or whether you'd like me to interview individual school committee members. I'd be happy to do that. The online survey we've already talked about. We usually get great participation in the online survey. Less in the focus groups because people are so busy, but we try to schedule them in convenient times, maybe parent group in the morning and a parent group at night, so and teachers also after school, obviously. So we will do that, and I will work with the liaison. Are we ready to talk about the letter?
Can I ask one more question? This might have been in the proposal and I don't remember, but after you've conducted all of the focus groups, do you compile all of that information together in some kind of way?
Yes.
Okay.
The ideal candidate profile. So I will pull it together. You will see a copy.
Okay.
The screening committee will use it very carefully, I hope, in looking for candidates.
Yeah.
This is what the North Kingstown community needs at this particular point in its evolution, and this is what you need to be looking for. So,
Just one question. So nobody will see the actual individual responses, only a curated summary of them?
exactly.
Okay.
Nothing will say, you just can't believe what Ms. Lima said. No, that won't happen. No, it's all compiled. And it's amazing how much consensus you get among groups, usually, but
We'll see.
maybe not. So and that will be used. It's a really important document because it gives specifics about what's important to North Kingstown at this particular time. Okay, the information letter. We did talk about the need to put in qualifications, and I think we have kind of an agreement on that. Determining the approval process. Tonight, if possible, you have a copy of it. Is it satisfactory if we put in the qualifications as we looked at it? It's at the end, I think, of the packet.
See if it's in I don't know if it's in.
So we have, just so you know, we have a couple different packets. We have a summary packet that includes the letter, and then we have the bigger packet. So that's what
It's probably in the bigger packet.
the bigger packet, okay.
It's actually in both. It's in the little summary packet I made. And
So what is it we're looking at? I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
it
Oh, this
says-
letter that says executive opportunity and draft.
That's it.
Okay, so this is in the packet we're looking at. Okay, that we all have. Okay, now we know what we're looking at. We're good.
Do you want to take a minute to look at it again? Or?
And the part that's in our packet that says this position offers an opportunity to lead a district that has A, B, C, D, E, that is part of the letter, or is that just a recommendation?
No, I think you put that in.
those are actual, actual data from our school.
Right.
Those are focuses that we picked out to put into this letter. Again, open for your
Right, no, I agree with all of them, but that was my question. Like this, what we're talking about now, it's not replacing this, it's adding to it.
and that little section were written specifically for North Carolina.
Okay.
So really the only thing that you need to insert is the qualifications and the kind of experience you want the ideal candidate to have. And it's somewhat general, as we talked about. We get more specific when we talk to the community.
So we did discuss the qualifications, so I
Yes.
think we have that all set. So what other specific information do you need? Do you need us to fill in that the ideal candidate will have experience with? Or we went over that as well, too, right?
Yes, you did. Yep.
Yep, okay. I just want to make sure, because we sort of started this earlier and came back to it. I don't want to duplicate
We
anything.
did.
I also think she's asking, are you comfortable with the
No, and I do. I mean, I think that it's an excellent, the letter and the statistics and the details, I think you've captured the town in a great snapshot.
Thank you, Kathy.
I was just going to say, I want to
Okay, then
I want to
you
thank
did.
Kathy for
Thank
that.
you.
'Cause Kathy did quite a bit of work on this, so thank you.
It came from documents that describe this town in a variety of places. A Chamber of Commerce, town website, our website, at Rhode Island Department of Ed. It wasn't anything, I didn't make anything up. It really, we've got great descriptions of this town, and I've just put them together.
And thank you, because it is an excellent overview.
Great. Then I think we have the information letter. It's the last thing says review salary range. We don't need to do that now, but at some point I will need information about what the school committee is thinking only once have I ever had a problem with that, where a candidate was making a very large salary and couldn't go forward because the school committee couldn't match it. So we want to be careful of that, but it's down the road. So the advertising and electronic outreach is done by NSDEC. They post it online more than once. It will keep being sent to networks and job boards. There is some additional fee-based advertising. I never think it's really necessary, because I think when you get it out through the organizations that we're going to use, it's fine. Some people would want to advertise in Providence paper or Boston paper. That's not where people look for these jobs. So you don't need to spend the money unless you really want to. School committees don't usually want to.
Back to if we end up not getting a
Sure.
lot of applications initially, we
Right.
could always consider later.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, now the screening procedure. The role of the school committee. You know what the role of the school committee. By law, you appoint the superintendent, and that's very clear. The consultant, my role is clear too. I'm here to assist, advise, support, but we don't make a recommendation. We don't tell you who you are to hire. It's a screening committee's role, and I'll work closely with the screening committee based on the profile that we put together. And the screening committee will decide who to interview. They usually select 8 to 10 people, but it depends on the pool, on who they want to interview, and we'll select people to pass along to you. There's no absolute number, but it's usually a few people. And there are several reasons for that. People who are applying for these very visible positions don't want their names out there until they're really close, until they're one of a few finalists. So the screening committee will not put forward a dozen people. People would not agree to that. So the candidates would not. So the school committee would then interview those semifinalists or finalists, however we want to put it. I don't know whether you interview an executive session or you'll interview an open session. It's up to you.
Well, the question for that, we would prefer to do it in open session. The question is similar to what you said before. We don't want to lose a extraordinarily for example, if it looks like you've got 3 well-qualified candidates who would not agree to do it, that's a problem. So we'd obviously prefer to do it in open, but we'd have to listen to your advice on that if you thought it was going to be a problem.
I think if you have 2 or 3 candidates, they probably would be prepared to know their names are going to go forward.
Because we would want to do it open if we can.
And if they do go forward, you can also set up times for the community to not interview, but to meet and to ask questions and to get to know a few of the candidates. That's a possibility. It depends. Rhode Island's open meeting law is different than Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, they'd have no choice of having it open. But I think here there are some choices. But you would prefer to have it open, and I think given the circumstances, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Yeah. I think when the screening committee sends them forward, they're really semifinalists, and then you decide on who the finalist is.
Is there any point in the process, whether it's through the introductory letter or some other letter, that we would state ahead of time that final interviews or semifinalists will be interviewed publicly, so that somebody wouldn't apply if they didn't want to be have their name go forward at the last minute? Have you ever seen that?
I haven't, but there's no reason we couldn't do that. Make sure that people know that once it gets down to a few people, that their names will be public. And when I set up the screening committee interviews, I let people know that. Yep. Let me make a note. All right, let's. Okay, thanks. So now we can discuss the screening committee. In the packet, there are some recommendations. 10 to 12 people is usually the best. But, you know, if you only wanted 9 or if you wanted 13, it's up to you. But representatives should come from the parents, of course, from the teachers, from the administrative team. Sometimes school screening committees include a student. It's a lot of work for a student in the summer, but they're amazingly helpful. So that's up to you. Are there other groups that you think should be part of focus groups?
One group, well, I have a couple questions if I can dive in on this. So I think the category of people that you have laid out here is very good. One thing that I do see that's missing is somebody from the special ed.
Mr. Waterman just passed me a note.
So that's something that I think we definitely need to make sure is included as its own entity, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And then my question is, and this is probably diving into the bigger conversation, but so one elementary parent, one middle school parent.
How?
So right. So I mean, I would think, like I think you alluded to it, like have the PTOs put forward their recommendation, because I wish Mr. McKay was still here. I disagree with him about bipartisan participation. A superintendent is not a political position. I do believe firmly that we should have a wide representation of community members. I just don't think Democrat or Republican or Independent or Tea Party or whatever bears any relation to this particular position. But I am firmly a believer that we need to have wide representation. So that's my concern is, you know, we shouldn't be picking the people. I think the category of each person here should be putting their own person forward. But one concern I did have is a teacher. I think we need more than just the union representative as a teacher. I think we need actual, not that they're not actual teachers, but you know what I mean? Like somebody who is not a union representative. They're all union representatives, but not union leadership. I would like to see an actual teacher participate as well. And I guess my question is, like, how do we, it's easy to say, okay, we're going to have the PTOs put forward the parents, but who do we task with, like, the senior citizen and the public officials? Like, how do we designate the person to pick that?
Well, there are some, looking at this list, I can think of, you know, some solutions to some of them. So central office administrator, we can leave that to Mr. Waterman. Same thing with the principal. A teacher. I hear your point, but that's a little trickier than you think. I mean, when we reach out to the teachers are represented by a union, and they're going to want, if you're asking the teachers to select their candidate, they're going to select their candidate, whoever they choose it to be.
Solely a teacher focus group?
I think we have that option, yes. Yeah. So again, remember, there's a difference between participation in the process and shaping what our ideal candidate is versus being actually on the interview committees. So.
If there are actual, if there is like the teacher focus group,
Yep.
and then they end up putting a union
Right.
rep as the teacher,
And then
I'm
just
fine with that.
going down the list, member of the support staff, same answer with the ESP union.
Mm-hmm.
A public official, I would tell you, I do not want to bloat this committee so large that it gets unwieldy, but I think we would want to have probably the town manager and a representative from the town council, and then leave it to, similarly the town council, I'd say the town manager or whoever he designates from the town administration, and then a member of the town council, which we can leave to them to select. A senior citizen, we can reach out to the senior center.
Yeah, that's
Contact the the leadership at the senior center and see if there's someone that they know would be willing to participate and have the time.
Or Mr. Mollis might be able to help with that.
Likewise, too. I'll circle back to the parents part. Business person, just like this says, I think we reach out to the Chamber of Commerce, member of the school committee. We can talk to the principal of the high school about whether she thinks that a student would be able to put in that kind of time. And then parents are tricky. We have one high school, 2 middle school, 5 elementary schools, and a specialized program school. How do towns or school committees typically deal with that when you are saying, okay, high school parent, that's easy. We can go to the high school PTO and ask them, who they would like to put forward. If we ask the middle school, we have 2 PTOs and 2 potential people, and elementary we have 5 potential, 6 if you count Davisville Academy.
But you're not going to have eight.
No, so if it's one,
There isn't a general overall parent group.
No.
Educational Foundation?
Yeah, but they wouldn't.
Yeah, but they're not PTO.
Right.
They support the work, but I don't think.
This sounds a little weird, but I've been thinking about this for months, and the best idea that I've come up with is to ask each PTO to put forward someone, and again, remember, part of it is who wants to do it and will do a good job and can do it. It's a lot of work. And, who do they think are appropriate? And so high school is easy. Middle school, you have both PTOs, and we draw a name out of a hat. And same thing with elementary, because that is a completely fair way to do that. So, Mr. Waterman, do you have a
Not related to PTOs, so I want to let that conversation. I do have a question on a different line item, so I want to make sure you're all set.
Yeah, no, I agree with that because it's either that or it's ask the 5 elementary schools to designate a person and then have them duke it out who gets
and
on it.
and I mean,
and I just think it's easier.
They could do that,
right.
but I think, as
So
random as it might be, it's also very
It's
fair. And
right.
yeah,
Yep.
So you're talking about having an elementary parent, a middle school parent, and a high school parent? Okay, so that would be 3. And you can also specify that maybe one of those should be a special ed parent.
well, I
No,
think that's a different
special ed is
community.
a separate category. Yeah, I think it's important that be broken out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have a very active special education advisory committee that
Okay.
Would be
Advisory
people
committee.
it's called CELAC,
So
SELAC.
what about teachers? How many folks, how many representatives do you want? Elementary, middle school, and high school? That would be 3 teachers.
Now we're getting big. Yeah, I mean, this gets tricky.
So, well, let's see where we are, and then we can decide.
Yep.
And then the public, you said town manager, town council, that's 2.
Yep. I only added 1 to this list that you had. No, I'd want the town manager and a town council. I mean, I think that's appropriate.
So that's 2.
Yep.
Okay. And senior citizens would be 1. The Chamber of Commerce,
That'd be 1.
do you think some of the parents would be business people? So it's one of the ways you get around this is if people wear more than one hat.
Right, but I mean, still, at the same time, I think it's important to sort of reach out to these varied areas in town
And
have as
possibly
much.
a student, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I think,
I
the
think
students-
definitely a student.
yeah, it's also the hardest one to get. So that's
I actually have 12 here, which is doable. How did you get 14?
if you did did you how many you
Oh,
put more than one
but
teacher?
this
Probably
is
right?
just-
no. Okay.
No, yeah.
Town manager,
I know.
the whole list, plus we added town manager and CELAC, right?
So this is what I have. So tell me what I'm missing, because you don't have to have a representative from everybody on that list. That was just kind of a possibility list.
I think we need
But it's a great
I
list.
think we need it. Yes, we do.
I think we might be at 14. I mean, that's
You have special
big.
ed. Yes. Well, tell me where I'm missing. A special ed representative, 3 parents, 3 teachers. Oh, I know what we're missing.
No,
No,
we weren't
no,
doing 3
one
teachers.
teacher.
We were doing 1 teacher. If you had if you do 3 teachers, you've added 2 more. You'd be at 16, which I think is too big.
Okay. So the one thing I was missing, I still have I think you just need more than 1 teacher. But that's my recommendation. It's certainly up to you.
So if we did 3, my math is not my strong suit. Teacher times 3, parent times 3, special ed, town people times 2, admin
The admin is a
Senior
principal and
center,
a central office person?
Principal,
That'd be
support
two.
staff,
Okay.
school committee.
You're
and
gonna hit
students.
16.
Three, yeah.
No, but more than that.
More than that?
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm at least at 15.
Did you get a central administrator
I
on there?
did, yes, yeah.
One central office and one principal?
Yep.
So I have 14 here. What am I missing?
We can't get the same number.
Guys, you don't want to make it too big because then it becomes
Unwieldy.
you can't deal with it. So you've got to keep it. You may want to sacrifice maybe the senior citizen.
No, because they pay the taxes but
No,
don't have
you don't
anybody
wanna
in the school, so I
sacrifice
think it's
senior
important that we
citizen.
have.
What if your senior citizen was a business person?
Well, that would be
You know what I'm saying? In other words, if you've got a business
ideal, but
overlap,
that's your dual hat routine.
you know, that kind of thing. Because look, if it gets much bigger than this, I've done a lot of these, it becomes a total waste.
Well, that was going to be my question. In everybody's experience, what is the absolute max? I understand 9 to 11 is ideal, but at what point is it like, forget it, we can't get anything done?
10 or 12 is usually workable.
I would have said
You may
12,
not,
so.
maybe we could take the student out?
No. I really think it's important that a student.
I do too, but
have-
it's summer.
What about a teacher parent? We have a pretty good number of teacher parents. Teachers who are also parents. We could try double dipping there.
The problem with that is you're not leaving it up to the PTOs to pick the parent in that case.
Fair enough.
So I have 14 people. Is that what you have?
Way more than that. It's so. If I tick off the list we've talked about, it's one central office administrator, one principal. We said 3 teachers because we've got one from each level. 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
A member of the support staff. That's 6 people.
Oh, you
Public
have
officials.
support staff.
7.
If we need to get rid of somebody, I think we need to have one public official, not 2. Let the town manager and the town council duke it out who they want to send over. But, I mean, I don't want to sacrifice a parent for a public official.
We could leave it to the town council to decide who they want to have. That would eliminate one. Okay, so we can say to the town council, whoever you feel is appropriate, whether it's one of your members or the town manager.
Okay. So I didn't have support staff, so now I still have 14. You have
I stopped my count.
a special ed parent, 3 other parents. I don't know if you could have 2 other parents, but one from elementary, one from middle school.
I think we really need to have one from each level. I
Okay.
do. I understand we're bumping up against, we have competing interests here. We need to have a committee that works, but we also have to have a maximum involvement.
I understand. One public official, one senior citizen, one Chamber of Commerce representative, one student, 2 administrators, a principal and a central office, and 1 support staff. I have 14. I have actually worked with bigger committees, but it's not great.
I have 15.
I have 15. There's 15.
So I don't know where we're not
She's
lining
missing
up.
Special ed, I think.
Oh, special ed maybe?
What if you did 2 teachers
Instead of 3?
instead of 3? Why don't we knock the teachers down to 2 instead of 3?
We could do that.
Different level from the principal, so if we just make sure that it's like rigged, not rigged, but you know what I mean, set up so that.
Right.
Wrong word.
So if you use an elementary principal, then your teachers will be from middle school and high school.
Okay,
Yep.
then
knock down
so
a
let's do
teacher.
that. So 2 teachers,
So that brings us down to 14.
and I get 14 too.
And are we saying it's going to be an elementary principal? Like
We're
is that
saying
the-
different level from the principal. So
Yes.
if the principal is from the high school, then it would be
the other
middle and,
teachers.
right.
Yep, okay, yep.
Teachers other than level of principal.
And part of this is going to factor into timelines
Okay.
on who's available.
So that gets
Yeah,
it down
definitely.
to 13.
So what does that get
Still
us
think
down
you
to?
should try to make the senior citizen a business person. And then you
Well,
get-
if it works out
You know,
that way,
because-
then
you know,
it
all I'm
works
saying
out
is that
way, right?
the bigger the committee, the more difficult it is to work with the committee.
Is there a difference between 13 and 14, though? Like,
Yeah. Sometimes it
I don't know.
depends a lot on the people. It's like a classroom of students. You can have a large classroom with great kids, and it's easy. You can have a small classroom with some difficult people, and it's hard. So it's hard to know.
I think that's about as small as we're going to be able to
Yeah, I just don't think that we can cut
13?
anything else.
Okay.
No, 14.
We
No.
14.
still have 14.
1, 2,
What?
3, 4, 5, 6,
Okay, tell me who you have, because I'm...
Okay.
13, 14.
A central office administrator,
Okay,
a principal,
right,
2 teachers,
okay,
a member of the support staff,
yep,
a public official,
right,
a senior citizen, an elementary parent, a middle school parent, a high school parent,
right.
a business person, a member of the school committee,
Oh, okay. So one school committee member.
Yep.
I didn't have that.
okay, a student, and our special education person.
Okay.
And that's
So
we
that's
found our
4.
missing person.
That's 14. Okay. At least we have our numbers coordinated.
We're just giving you an example of how the whole search is going to go. We're just warming you up now.
It's okay. This is very important for
It
you
is very
and for the
important.
community, and we want to make sure we have it right, so it's okay. All right. And I will work with the liaison and how we communicate with people to make sure we get the right folks on the screening committee.
So your letter to the screening committee goes through all of their responsibilities. Because I'm reading it here, 2.5-hour training, and then there are hour-long interviews with approximately 8 to 10 candidates.
It's going to be a major commitment.
So that is at least 13 hours at the minimum commitment in July and
There are
August.
actually 2 workshops,
2 trainings?
2 trainings, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
No, it's a major commitment.
It's a major
Yeah,
commitment. So it,
definitely.
and
And it also says somewhere, they really cannot miss any
Anything,
of it, right?
right.
Because they can't miss anything, so they absolutely have to commit. So
Right.
people have vacations and like all that stuff in the course of a 2-month
So we
period.
can be really clear about dates and
Yes.
times and that people are available. And sometimes you can't help if emergency comes up and somebody can't, so you have to accommodate that. The last one I did, everybody attended everything, which was the first time that's actually happened. No crises. So hopefully it will happen here too.
So I just want to make sure, because Lisa brings up a really good point. So like, Mike, if you're like liaisoning with the PTOs, you were going to say, send me somebody who can commit to A, B, C,
Like
D, E.
right up
Right
front.
up front, right. So
Exactly.
that if they don't even, that they know what the commitment is before they even go out within their group to look for the person.
That's right.
And
Okay.
we'll have dates as to when these
We
commitments.
actually have
There's
dates
dates
on the
Yep.
timeline for the 2 workshops.
so people will know if
You
you
can't
can't make
commit if you
those,
don't
don't,
know.
yeah,
Yeah.
And
please
there's
don't
a
apply.
range of dates for the interviews. I don't think it's ever been that everybody's always available at every time, but we find a way to do it, so, but they have to be at those workshops.
Yeah, that, and those are fixed, and those can be provided
Yep,
immediately?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
To clarify, those are virtual or in person?
Looks like all virtual.
All
The
virtual?
workshops are virtual, yep.
And are the interviews virtual also, or are those face-to-face?
That's up to the screening committee. They
Okay.
can be either way.
Okay.
The last one I did with the screening committee, I don't attend the interviews. The screening committee did it virtually. They wish they'd done it in person.
Yeah.
I would think when you're interviewing candidates, you need to be in the room, but
You need that, like, and you don't
But, so as long as it's confidential, it's not, doesn't have to be an open meeting.
do you have them sort of, I mean, I'm just sort of envisioning if you're going to sign up for this, you should sort of sign a pledge that says, you know, I understand that I'm going that it's all confident. Do you do something like that? I mean, I just think it's so important.
And what do you do if they don't?
Well, okay, I know, but
It-
that's
you
why it's a
can't-
pledge, not a binding contract.
Right, but you can't, no matter what, you
I've never
can't-
seen it done.
Okay.
I think we just need to emphasize.
Then we'll
that
make
if
it
they're
clear.
going to do, they really want to do this, they have to commit to that time.
Yep.
And that it's confidential, right?
Yeah.
It is
Yeah,
confidential.
but I think they need to know that going into it, too.
I'm sorry, what is confidential?
The interview, like the interview,
Who's being interviewed is confidential. I think the screening committee needs to be aware of that as well.
Okay, okay.
And again, the reason for that being that some of the candidates, as in any job, when you're sometimes sending that letter, your boss doesn't always know you're looking, and it's just,
Right.
It's important to have in order to get the largest pool of candidates, it's important that people know that until they're
Right.
later on in the process.
So Brian and I will work on the letters and all of that. Okay. I think we've talked about all the screening committee.
If you're not present at the interviews, is there a chair of the screening committee? Is there a point? Does the screening committee select a chair? How's that organization?
Either way. Sometimes it's obvious who's going to be the chair, and sometimes they select somebody. So you do need a chair. And I tie in at the end of the interviews to help them go through a process of deciding who should go forward. So I will be working with them. I just won't be in attendance at the interviews.
Okay.
Okay, then other matters.
I'm sorry, can we just go back to that for 1 second? So you won't be in attendance at the interviews. It'll be only the people on the screening committee?
Exactly.
Okay, no HR type representation there? I think that's something, sorry, Brian, but.
No. I didn't ask, what was your question?
Well, I just asked that because she can't be there for the interviews, it's only the screening committee, so there's no HR type
No, but
oversight.
they'll get all the packets together, and your committee will get everything ready for the screening committee.
Absolutely.
Like, she'll do everything, but she won't presently be at the interview.
Right, but
That's the question.
so typically, there is an HR type presence at any type of an interview. Is that not the case here?
No, you're correct.
Okay.
It hasn't been the case in screening committees that I've worked with. But you could make the HR person the central office representative.
Right.
He could, so,
Right.
but that would be up to.
And where do these interviews typically take place?
Choice of the.
Do they use a school department administration building? Do they use an independent site? Because depending on when these interviews happen, there are people coming in and out, and again, to protect confidentiality.
There was one community that wanted to do it in an independent site, but usually it takes place in a school building. And if it's in person, you need somebody who's going to greet the person, and you just need to make the arrangements. And yeah, people could lurk around to see who's coming in, but I don't think that usually happens.
I'm sorry, I have to go back to the HR thing for a minute. You'll have to excuse me. I don't have an education background. I come from the business world, and in the business world, there's always an HR person present at an interview to avoid any type of question that opens the hirer up for a liability, which is something that is concerning, right? My concern is that there's going to be a group of regular people who are doing their very best, but I don't want there to be any type of inappropriate questioning that would open the district up for liability. Do you have kids? Are you work? There's a whole list of questions.
That's one thing I go over with the screening committee. The questions you can't ask. You can't ask the obvious ones. You know them. Yep. You married, you planning to have kids.
Yeah.
You can't ask those questions. Anything personal. So I always go over that and emphasize it. And I could work with the chair to make sure that if anything happens,
and
chair
regardless,
intervenes.
there is a central office administrator that's going to be present, and whether it happens to be, it doesn't have to be our HR director, that person can be briefed and know what the rules are and make sure that they are enforced and protect the district in that way.
Exactly. It's very important. I agree.
And we do have principals who have led interview committees for teachers. We've had central administrators who have led interview committees for other principals.
I'm not doubting people's ability to know what's right. I just, it's one thing to be aware of what's right, but then when you get in that group, it's not my place to speak up. You know what I mean? So I just want to make sure that there is a designated person, and that that person is the chair of the steering committee who's been briefed on what's acceptable and what isn't.
Exactly.
And that's it. Yep. Thank you.
Understood.
No, all these things are very important, and so good to raise them. I don't think that we have to go over any of this at the moment. Examples of contracts, informational documents to send the candidates. That's a good thing to do, but we that can be decided later. But the district website and using the district website to keep the community apprised of the process, of putting links on where people can link in with their interest in completing the survey. So that will be important right up front.
I know someone who can get that done.
I have a feeling the interim superintendent would be a good person. I'm sure he has nothing else to do. All right, any other questions?
I do just have one question. So based on this timeline, we're finalizing the letter tonight. We're going to send it out. You're going to get going. And then it looks like, according to this, that the focus groups and the surveys and those types of things will take place in June, which is 15 plus so days away.
I hope so.
Correct?
Yeah,
okay.
we've got to get going with that.
Okay.
When is the last day of school?
The 23rd, I think.
23rd, okay. Okay, we'll try to fit them all in. It's going to be, yes, it will be very challenging. And I'm sure Brian has a list of all of those events and things that and maybe we'll have to do some work on weekends. People don't like that, but.
Are we going to put out any type of timeline to the community?
Well, so what are our next steps from here? So we have our draft timeline. We've worked that out. I think we're that, yeah, I mean.
You could post that.
I mean, well, this is on our agenda already. I mean, so it's available on the website. We could
But
take
that's only
this
for
and we
people
could
who read the
move it
agenda.
up on the website.
Sure.
What I can do is I can have a web page created towards this, and we can embed these documents kind of once we get finalized working versions of them.
Good.
We can post this information as well as duplicate whatever it is you put out.
Okay,
I can
great.
make sure that gets dual posted.
Yeah, I think that's important, that people will have a way to access the process. All right, anything else?
Any other questions? Okay, then if not, thank you very much for coming down. I apologize for your traffic troubles.
Well, I'm sure they aren't your fault. But it was good to meet with you all in person. And,
Likewise.
I'm looking forward to working with you to find the perfect candidate. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so then we've reached the end of our agenda, and I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. A motion from Ms. Lima, second from Ms. Hildebrand. Ms. Hildebrand, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all for coming.